So, you've been assigned to teach public speaking. It's not essay writing, and it's not theater. We want to make the experience as beneficial for our students as possible. We want them to leave our classroom empowered, inspired, and confident in their skill sets. But who has the time to read research and go to workshops? That's where I come in. My name is Julian, and you're listening to the Public Speaking Educators Forum. This podcast is for educators who teach public speaking. Each week, you'll hear from a fellow instructor who has an interesting trick to the trade to share with you. We are speaking up so that you can help your students to speak up too. Tonight on the forum, we'll be speaking with Dr. Fred Fitch, who is assistant professor in the School of Communication, Media, and Journalism at Kean University in New Jersey. He also serves as the basic course director for the Speech Communication as Critical Citizenship course, or COM 1402, which is a required course for all undergraduates at Kean. Dr. Fitch, welcome to the forum.
It's great to be here.
Great to have you. So, you are the basic course director, and I know that at different schools that have this role, it is interpreted differently depending upon what the needs of the school or the department are. So, if you wouldn't mind, what is your job description, lack of a better term, as course coordinator?
My job description involves a couple of things. It involves, first of all, making sure that all of the 40 sections or sometimes 50 sections of the basic communication course that we teach at Kean is doing more or less the same thing. And so we do that through a biannual training of all of our instructors. And it's great because I want not just new instructors to come, but I want the veterans who've taught the class now, many of them for 20 years, so that we can share experiences and they can be invaluable resources in getting new instructors ready to teach the basic course. So teacher training is one, assessment is the other. Our basic course has a very enviable position in the college curriculum in that we are one of the 4 classes that all students at Kean University have to take, and that's why we have so many sections. And it's a great privilege because every single student at Kean, in theory, will pass through our doors unless they've taken the class elsewhere. And the third is to manage any incidents in the classroom or any pedagogical questions that our team of instructors might have. Many of them come from all different walks of life. With some of them are communication people. They've got their masters in communication. Others come from. I've had instructors who were ministers. I've had instructors who were journalists. I've even had. I currently have an instructor who is an actor. So it's a great wealth of diversity, but part of my job is to make sure everybody's still doing more or less the same thing.
All right. One thing you mentioned just a minute ago was the biannual training program, and you say that you like the veteran instructors to attend as well as the new
Definitely.
Instructors. So I'm assuming this is a program you designed yourself. So if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about this training program for COM 1402.
Part of it is to help build community among our instructors. I think that's something that's unique about our team of instructors that we have teaching the basic course at Kean. We spend a lot of time just getting to know each other and giving our backgrounds, telling our stories. Then that's the first part of the day-long training. Then the second part is I go over what are the basic core assignments for our basic course. In our case, the core assignments are an informative speech of 7 minutes, a persuasive speech of 7 minutes, and then every section does small group communication, and we do what we call a group symposium, in which students in smaller groups have to get together and solve a problem of some type of social relevance. It's the idea is to get everybody on the same page regarding what those assignments are and how they are assessed. And then the last component is, because we incorporate a textbook that uses an online platform, we use McGraw-Hill's Connect. They get training on how to use Connect, how to set up their computers, and how to access the Connect site, so that they, even though it's not technically required, which strongly encouraged, and I'll explain probably some of that, why that is later, so that the major questions about technology, and more important, so that they know who to go to when they have technology questions. So, and then I said 3 things, actually there's 4 things. Every semester we assess the basic class on the 2 speeches that students have to do. I do a basic statistical analysis, a t-test, to see to make sure that the first speech and the second speech, that there's the significant difference in the improvement in the variables that we trace, that we study. And if there's not, then we use that to, the term is close the loop, to ask the question of the instructors, why aren't outlining skills showing a difference, or why aren't gathering materials for speeches showing a difference between speech 1 and speech 2? And those discussions are actually very productive. Sometimes they're soul searching, and but it keeps us on track. It really gives high credibility to being that one of those basic general education classes.
So you mentioned assessment, and I know that's a big part of basic course coordination, particularly for accreditation purposes. So if you wouldn't mind telling me about the assessment instrument that you use for assessing the speeches in COM 1402, as well as just a little more about the process that you go through every year. Okay.
The assessment tool that we use is it's not my own creation, it's my own evolution. When I was hired 15 years ago, not 15, is it 15 years? Yeah, it is, 2005, 16 years ago, as a basic course director. We had an assessment tool that looked at, I want to say, like 25 different variables. And it was unwieldy, and yet it was kind of the, what do I want to say? When we make our assessment tools, we kind of marry them. So I went through a 5-year process of serving divorce papers on that old assessment tools, but taking the ideas from the assessment tools and taking those, if I remember correctly, like 50 variables, and consolidating them down into 10 different variables. And that's really easy to calculate, because you give each variable 10 points and you got 100 points, and then you can do that, whatever with what you want. My idea for our assessment was to give divide it into columns, and make it like a table. So for every variable, the variables are in one column. Then there's a column for scores, 1 out of 5, and then for every variable, I have a list of specific things that the instructor can tick off, either as a plus or a minus, like organization. Introduction, does that need work? If it needs work, it gets a minus. If it needs, if it's okay, you put a plus by it. Main points, transitions, conclusion. And so it's a little shorthand, so that, because the hard thing about doing assessment for a live speech is that you've got to be able to think quickly and write quickly. And so that middle column in the assessment serves as kind of a shorthand for the different components of that variable. And then there's a wide open space, a third column, in which they can write their exact comments and thoughts and ways to improve and things like that. So, but the idea is to make it comprehensive and at the same time quick, so that by the time the speech is over, the student has been assessed with some good concrete suggestions on how to improve their public speaking.
Actually, as we were talking, you sparked a new question. So this assessment instrument is used for accreditation and assessment purposes, but also for the student to receive their feedback. And now you teach this course, I'm assuming, at least every year, I would imagine.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things that I insist on. If I'm going to direct the class, I need to be given at least one section per academic year, so that I'm aware of because times change. And when I first started teaching, the one topic that I wanted to avoid, for example, was childhood obesity. But it seemed like everybody was talking about childhood obesity, and just when I thought we were done with it, Michelle Obama came along, and that made that her point. It just changes every year. I've never been comfortable when students try to talk about abortion, but then Texas came along and created an abortion law that brings it back into the public forum again. And so we've got to talk about it. So and that's why I've got to keep current with what's going on in the class. If not, I will become irrelevant. I don't want that to happen.
This is going to be kind of an interesting slant on it, but obviously an assessment instrument is used to give the students feedback. But have you received any feedback from the students regarding the assessment instrument? Have students ever remarked on it being either clear or maybe hard to understand? Like, what is the students' response to the
That's
feedback?
That's a great question. I don't know. I've never received any negative feedback. As course director, my biggest concern is that the professors who teach the class like it and find it easy to use, and because we use it as a part of our to collect data for the purpose of university accreditation. Once you start using an assessment tool that is going to be far-reaching to the university, it is set in stone, baby. You can't change it. I mean, there have been times that I've wanted to make some changes, and the general education director has said, "Oh no, don't do that," because then that affects everything. So that, I guess that's what I would say to your listeners: of once you, if your assessment tool is related at all to your school's accreditation, then remember that what you put down on paper and what you decide to assess is you got to live with it probably for the rest of your teaching career. So until they get the nerve to change it again.
All right. So you have a number of people teaching COM 1402, and I'm sure everybody comes with their own teaching philosophies. They have their own ideas about how to do things, their own slants on assignments. And I'm curious to know, you're in an interesting position because I'm sure you want to nurture that, but at the same time, you want to make sure that the objectives are being met similarly across each section. So how do you balance autonomy or giving your adjunct faculty sort of academic freedom while trying to achieve consistency across sections?
That's a great question. I would say, Julian, that where we are stringent is on the three assignments that every section has in common: the informative speech, the persuasive speech, and the group symposium. The symposium a little bit less so, because that actually is not assessed for the purposes of general education. But we are very dogged to make sure that everybody understands what an A speech is, what a B speech is, what a C speech is. And we try to be vigilant, very vigilant against grade inflation, so that we all understand when a student gets a grade, that grade is the standard across all sections. Sometimes that's tricky, but because we teach a hybrid class, which has a very large theoretical component and a background in communication studies. That's where I tell instructors, this is your greatest hits class. So if your area is business communication and you want to teach about interviewing, or you want to teach about organizations, then that's going to be where you're going to teach. If you're more of an interpersonal scholar, then make those chapters, or intercultural scholar, make that chapter your fort. And I let them pick and choose. Outside of the public speaking chapters, the ones they want to emphasize, the ones they want to even omit, if they want to omit a chapter or two. That's because they need to feel comfortable teaching the class, and we need to take maximum advantage of their diverse background. Like we have one adjunct for us who was a former very important reporter for the Star Ledger. And of course, his area is journalism. And so the title of our class is Communication is Critical Citizenship. And so he really emphasizes the critical citizenship part of the class. And one of the things that he has them do every class is to bring a newspaper to class, and they read it and they talk about issues that need to be talked about in a public forum. I don't do that because that's not my background, but I'm glad he does, because he's teaching out of his fort. But everybody teaches the same basic assignments.
So you have parameters in place, but at the same time, you're not micromanaging.
Exactly. No, God forbid.
I think it's very easy for someone in your position to kind of fall into that way of doing things, the micromanaging.
Yeah.
Here's the syllabus, and week by week, and these PowerPoint slides, and these test questions, and
right. Well, I believe that, and Kean has, I want to say, like, we're the fifth most diverse student body in the country, or the third or the fourth, but we celebrate the diversity. But if you're celebrating diversity, not every class can be a cookie cutter. You've got students from different backgrounds and different understandings of what's important, even a different understanding of rhetorical devices and argumentation, and so you've got to adjust, you got to bend, and not bend is not the word. You've got to morph. Yeah, you've got to grow into that particular group of students.
It's interesting because a lot of colleges like to use the word diversity. They celebrate diversity, as they should, but then when it comes to the instructional activities, is there a lot of diversity taking place?
Yes.
Is that embraced on the syllabi, on the lesson plans?
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it's and to me, that's something I'm very, very passionate about, because like for example, right now I'm teaching a section of ESL students, and this is their first exposure to speaking English publicly. Okay, so do I have to morph my understanding of what's required? Yes, but at the same time, do I have to expect them to exceed my expectations? I guess is the word, and the answer is yes, because as I told some of them today, your ability to communicate will actually forgive your grammatical and your accent errors and the way you speak English, if you can learn how to communicate effectively and dynamically. And I think I talked about a movie I was watching last night with Penelope Cruz, who has a very marked accent, and yet you can't take your eyes off her because she's such a tremendous actress.
So changing gears a little bit, you mentioned a little while ago that you use an online component in this course, McGraw-Hill Connect specifically.
Right.
And I feel like this could definitely spark some debate, because you're thinking, well, this is a course where we want students to speak and we want to emphasize human communication, and we're giving them an online counterpart. So, I'm sure there are people that will applaud that effort, and there are probably people who'd criticize it. So what are your thoughts about using a platform like McGraw-Hill Connect in a basic speech course?
Well, I've got to be careful here, because I don't want to make this sound like I'm like an advertisement for McGraw-Hill. Number one, I believe that digital technology is here to stay, and it is an essential job skill. So part of my own conviction is that students have to be comfortable using any type of digital technology. And if, by the way I teach a class, they're going to have to learn more about digital technology, all the better. So that's number one. Number two, the technology, and this is not an ad, that we use in McGraw-Hill, to me, it's genius, because it actually makes students read the textbook. They have a platform called SmartBook, which allows the students to read, then ask them questions, and it learns their learning style and things like that. I know that there are other publishing companies that have a similar venue, I guess is the word I'm looking for. But I use it because it makes the students read the textbook without having to make me yell at them for not reading it, or I don't know, over test them for not reading it. And something that is new, I think it's used both by McGraw-Hill and by Pearson, is a platform called Go React. Are you familiar with this platform?
I've heard of it.
What it allows you to do is to record a student's speech, and while they're speaking, to put your comments and about the speech as they are speaking. You're typing away on your computer while you're filming them, and it actually inserts those comments live right into the speech, so that if if they start doing the uhs and the ums, you can just say your fluency, and they know exactly what you're talking about, because it's real time with their speeches. To me, that's genius. That's I grew up as an undergraduate speaking with a videotape recorder, and having to go back and rewind the videotape to watch your speech. So this is remarkable. So
it sounds like you use technology more or less to supplement the classroom instruction, but not replace it.
Oh no, never. In fact, if during in our strictly online class before the pandemic, students are required, for every one of their speeches that they record and they upload to our platform, they're required to have an audience present, and they're required to pan across the group of about 8 students or 8 people who are there to watch the speech and evaluate them as well.
All right, so they're still getting an audience experience.
Exactly.
That's very important. So since the speech communication as critical citizenship is not technically a public speaking course, but rather a hybrid course in communication, which includes public speaking, it's very easy in that situation for an instructor to overemphasize public speaking, just as it's easy for them to underemphasize public speaking. So how do you ensure that public speaking skills are emphasized with the same level of importance as, let's say, group communication, interviewing, or other things like that?
Okay. We set up our basic course in such a way that approximately a half to 2/3 of the points that a student can earn will come directly from doing the speaking assignments. So, so that for the public speech, it's worth so much, but you add on to that an outline, you add on to that feedback to other speakers, so that if they do not do the public speaking part, they're not going to be able to pass the class. So it's a very strong public speaking class, but not entirely. And that's where the greatest hits comes in. That's where we supplement it with a solid introduction to communication studies, to communication theory, and to the different applications of communication studies in organization communication, intercultural, interpersonal, things like that. So, but I will admit that if we have untoward events like storms or pandemics or whatever, it's that other third of the class that will probably get sacrificed just to make sure that they get the public speaking component, because that's the only exposure that they will get to public speaking unless they major in communication. So we still want it to be a central focus.
I agree. And like you said, in a lot of the general education curriculum, you see at so many schools, the 100 level courses are in lecture halls, or the instructor just chooses not to require speaking assignments because they take a long time and they don't want to sit through student presentations. The students don't want to do them. And it's a history class. Why should I have to give a presentation? So you're right. I feel like more and more the classes like this one that we're talking about tend to be the students' real only training opportunity in public speaking.
Right. And this is a battle not only that we have with curriculum, but also with the administration, who always wants to see our classes have more students into a class, so that they can hire just one professor for 50 students. That's a lot more economical than one professor for 15, and that's where and that's part of the reason why we have to emphasize so much the assessment part. So because we have to be able to prove every semester that we are making a difference in their public speaking abilities. Because if we don't do that, we've got good intentioned administrators who will say, well, hiring a professor for 20, actually for us it's 24 students, is very, very expensive when we could hire that same professor to teach 50 or 75. But you can't work on individual speaking skills in that large of a group. It has to be a smaller group.
Absolutely. And it is definitely a struggle to have to justify that year after year. So my hat off to you. Well, this pretty much wraps it up for this episode. So thank you, Dr. Fitch, for taking the time to talk to us and share what you do. And of course, thank you all for listening to this week's edition of the Public Speaking Educators Forum. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and Google Play. Follow us on Twitter at PSEF Podcast. And be sure to tune in again real soon.